things correctly and properly, and really just have the benefit of what, sometimes you could call it like a kitchen cabinet or a group of people that you could depend on to play a part in something like this. And then early on, it was just to help try to understand and learn what was going on and make sure that you kind of had a check and balance as you overviewed and looked at something like this. And those people would inform us about what one could expect about the reporting, for example, of the bomb itself, the alleged single bomb, and could a bomb like that even do the damage? And then, in addition to that, this particular subject matter, what we ended up calling as time went on the science part of this case. How do you blow up a building like that? How do you bring it down? What does it take? What could do it and what could not do it? And so we had experts like that we went to, many of them, and they would help us understand and give us their opinions and their experience about what to understand and what to believe about this case.
Well, now see, the official government story turned into that this truck bomb is what brought the building down. And to this day, that's what they say. Isn't that correct?
Yeah, to this day they say that.
And they no longer talk about the bombs that were taken out of the building itself. Is that right?
Yeah, and frankly, they won't talk about much of anything related to the case because, and I'm going to go off on a commentary, a short little commentary here. The government, and I've been a part of it for 18 years specifically, and about 30 years I've been involved in the political realm. The government doesn't really have to do anything unless we really make it do something, and usually the government isn't made to do anything, especially the bureaucracies. And so they really don't have to respond to anyone unless they're forced to by other elected officials, and that really doesn't happen very often. And in this case, they really haven't been forced to really come forward with real substantive answers about the inequities and lack of information about the bombing case. I know we're going to get into that as we go along here.
Sure, but here's the thing that puzzles me. The government is saying now that it was just the truck bomb, and yet the day of the bombing, the Justice Department confirmed that there were multiple bombs on site.
Yes.
And dozens of reporters confirmed that and talked about the fact that even the search for survivors had to be stopped while explosive devices were removed.
Right.
Yeah, the question has been raised way back then at that exact moment in time, and as those early days, weeks, and months went by, were there people that lost their lives because they stopped the investigation to go in and get materials out of the building, not bombs, but their paperwork and files and what have you.
Yeah, yeah.
And so,
well, here's the thing that intrigues me. The bombing took place on April the 19th. And on May 23rd, just a little over a month later, they demolished that building. That seems to me like they were in an awful big rush to destroy. I can't even imagine them being able to process all the evidence from April 19th to May 23rd.
Right. I agree. I mean, isn't that an awful rush to, I mean, it almost sounds like they were hiding evidence. I don't want to say they were hiding evidence, but in any other investigation, in a standard local police investigation, 6 weeks, and then you destroy the investigation site, the crime site, people would be screaming, "What are you doing?"
Yeah, you're right, and I think that last thing that you said, Lisa, is that people were traumatized, and so I don't think there was you had to have the help of a lot of the media like our local newspaper here, the Daily Oklahoman, or the Oklahoman as it's referred to now, to really accomplish something like that, not only about the building and taking down of the building, et cetera, but so many other aspects of this case. They're complicit in the cover-up of the Oklahoma City bombing because they didn't do their job in asking the questions and demanding answers. And so, when we focus on this question, not only did they take the building down very quickly, but they took it off and hauled it off, buried it with guards so that no one could come in and look at it.
Oh.
Not only that, but they also would not allow FEMA and other experts to come in and examine it. But they did bring a group of FEMA people in, and when others tried to come in and look at it, they really wouldn't let them examine the building and the remains of it. They kept them, I believe they got no closer than, it was 100 yards or more. Now, that's why we wrote this report. You referred to it as a book. It is a book, but it was actually a report. It wasn't a story about the bombing. It was our organization's, quote, official report on the factual evidence that we collected. And the factual evidence that is of a quality that could go before a jury or a grand jury. That's what we put in this final report book. And
how could any investigation be done from 100 yards away?
Well, it can't. And as I refer to this group of FEMA experts, they brought in and allowed FEMA to come in, and they brought them in to do a report on the science of the building. In other words, did the truck bomb do it, and how did it do it, et cetera, et cetera. And they wrote their own report, which we talk about in our book and include portions of it, and that FEMA report about the bomb in the building, the bombing in the building. But they would not think about this. It's just as incredible as them hauling off the building itself. They wouldn't let that group of experts come any closer than about 100 yards. That's a football field long.
Yeah.
As I recall the distance. And actually touch it, look at it, take samples, use other scientific methods to examine it. They could only look at it from a distance. It probably wouldn't even be as good as watching it on TV from up close.
Yeah, that's right.
How do you make an analysis?
Right.
How do you make an analysis like that? But then they wanted to present it to the world and in the trials that they had as being an examination, but it was not.
If you have questions for Charles, give us a call at 707-701-3325. This is absolutely fascinating. 707-701-3325.
It certainly is, and I've got a ton of questions, but I do want to remind our listeners, you can get a copy of the report, the book called Final Report. You can go to Charles's webpage, which is Charles Key, and that's spelled Key, charleskey.com. And you can get a copy of that book. I have read portions of that book. It is, and he's right, it is full of evidence. It is full of report after report after report. There's an appendix in this book that is miles long with all kinds of notations, graphs and pictures and a wide variety of other things. In my opinion, this is probably the definitive report on the Oklahoma City bombing. I've looked and I can't find anything else with this much information.
It will absolutely set your teeth on edge. If you have any thought that our government is transparent, let me tell you something. Folks, they have got the blinds pulled, the doors are locked, the people are not at home, or at least they're not at home to us, we the people. And they need to be, because we are supposed to be the government, not them. And that's not the way it is right now.
That's
right.
Why
this is relevant. It's 15 years ago, but this is relevant. It's 20 years ago.
20 years ago.
It's relevant today because the government today is less transparent now than it was in 1995.
That's certainly true.
You know what, Lisa, you might bring a lot of things back to memory. I remember the press asking me at one point, probably a couple of years down the road, as this as the case was still going on, because even after the bombing, there was all the investigation that continued to go on by both the government and private parties like us.
Mm-hmm.
And then lots of coverage because the trials were being prepared for, et cetera, et cetera. And the media asked me one day, they said, but I got asked this frequently, among other things, to chime in and talk about what the latest was on the Oklahoma City bombing. And they said, why do you keep pursuing this? Why don't you let it go? And I said, well, and it was kind of a natural reaction. I said, well, if we don't do this, if we don't hold the government accountable, something like this will happen again.
Absolutely.
And that was, I believe, I think that was the beginning of 2001 when the 9/11,
yes.
I mean, not 9/11,
well, September 11th, 2001 is when 9/11 took place.
That's right.
Yeah. So it was just before that, and in this report, actually, this report that we have that you're talking about actually came back from the printer, and it's 555 pages long, like 2 weeks or about 10 days before 9/11.
Oh, my goodness.
And I'll never forget a lot of the media coming to me at the time and saying, tell us your opinion and what you think, because they were shocked by 9/11, as we all were.
Mm-hmm.
And they were further shocked by the kind of the correlation between the two.
Right, right.
Well, we're going to take a break here. We're at the top of the hour. We're going to take a break here. But we've got Charles for at least the next 45 minutes, folks. If you've got questions, we want you to call.
And when we come back, we've got a caller from California.
Oh, great. Fantastic. All right. Well, we're going to take a break. We'll be back in just a few moments. You're listening to The Deloach Approach on WNLM Radio.
Just let those run wild until before. If I were the Prince of Darkness, I'd want to engulf the whole world in darkness, and I'd have a third of its real estate and 4/5 of its population, but I wouldn't be happy until I had seized the ripest apple on the tree. If I were the Prince of Darkness, I'd want to engulf the whole world in darkness, and I'd have a third of its real estate and 4/5 of its population, but I wouldn't be happy until I had seized the ripest apple on the tree. So I'd set about, however necessary, to take over the United States. I'd subvert the churches first. I'd begin with a campaign of whispers. With the wisdom of the serpent, I would whisper to you as I whispered to Eve, do as you please. To the young, I would whisper that the Bible is a myth. I would convince them that man created God instead of the other way around. I would confide that what's bad is good and what's good is square. And the old I would teach to pray after me, Our Father, which art in Washington. And then I'd get organized. I'd educate authors in how to make lurid literature exciting so that anything else would appear dull and uninteresting. I'd threaten TV with dirtier movies and vice versa. I'd peddle narcotics to whom I could. I'd sell alcohol to ladies and gentlemen of distinction. I'd tranquilize the rest with pills. If I were the devil, I'd soon have families at war with themselves, churches at war with themselves, and nations at war with themselves, until each in its turn was consumed. And with promises of higher ratings, I'd have mesmerizing media fanning the flames. If I were the devil, I would encourage schools to refine young intellects, but neglect to discipline emotions. Just let those run wild. Until before you knew it, you'd have to have drug-sniffing dogs and metal detectors at every schoolhouse door. Within a decade, I'd have prisons overflowing. I'd have judges promoting pornography. Soon I could evict God from the courthouse, then from the schoolhouse, and then from the houses of Congress. And in his own churches, I would substitute psychology for religion and deify science. I would lure priests and pastors into misusing boys and girls and church money. If I were the devil, I'd make the symbol of Easter an egg and the symbol of Christmas a bottle. If I were the devil, I'd take from those who have and give to those who want it until I had killed the incentive of the ambitious. What'll you bet? I couldn't get whole states to promote gambling as the way to get rich. I would caution against extremes in hard work, in patriotism, in moral conduct. I would convince the young that marriage is old-fashioned, that swinging is more fun, that what you see on TV is the way to be. And thus I could undress you in public, and I could lure you into bed with diseases for which there is no cure. In other words, if I were the devil, I'd just keep right on doing what he's doing.